Jake stepped off the transport shuttle and felt the alien world's heavy atmosphere press against his environmental suit. The purple sky stretched endlessly above, crystalline spires that seemed to grow from the planet's surface like frozen lightning. This was Kepler 442b, home to the insectoid race known as the Veltari, and Jake was here on the most important diplomatic mission of his career. The human colony ships had been traveling through space for 3 years when they encountered the Veltari fleet. What could have been humanity's first interstellar war instead became an opportunity for peace, when the aliens sent a surprising message requesting negotiations. Jake, a veteran diplomat with 20 years of experience in conflict resolution, had been chosen to represent Earth's interests. A group of Veltari approached him at the landing platform. They moved with fluid grace despite their 6 legs and chitinous exoskeletons that gleamed like polished obsidian. Their compound eyes reflected the purple sunlight as they bowed in what Jake recognized as a formal greeting gesture from his cultural briefings. The lead Veltari spoke through a translation device that converted their clicking language into English. "Welcome, Human Ambassador Jake. I am Advisor Keth. Her Majesty Queen Lyra awaits your presence in the Great Hall." Jake followed them through corridors lined with bioluminescent panels that pulsed with soft blue light. The architecture was organic, flowing like water frozen in time. Everything felt alive, from the walls that seemed to breathe to the floors that yielded slightly under his boots. The great hall opened before him like the inside of a massive shell. Hundreds of Veltari filled the space, their bodies creating a living tapestry of movement and color. At the center, on a raised platform that resembled a flower in bloom, sat Queen Lyra. Jake's first impression was of fragility. The queen appeared smaller than the other Veltari, her exoskeleton dulled and cracked in places. She moved slowly, as if each gesture required great effort. Her wings, which should have been transparent and strong according to his briefings, hung limp at her sides. A complex array of life support devices surrounded her throne, their soft humming filling the air with electronic whispers. "Approach, Human Ambassador." Queen Lyra's voice came through the translator, weaker than those of her subjects. "We have much to discuss." Jake walked forward, his diplomatic training overriding his curiosity about the Queen's obvious illness. He performed the human greeting gesture he had been taught, placing his right hand over his heart and bowing slightly. "Your Majesty, I am honored to meet you. I bring greetings from the United Earth Government and hope for peaceful relations between our peoples." Queen Lyra's compound eyes seemed to study him intently. "Peace is indeed what we seek, Ambassador Jake. My people have watched your species with great interest. You have traveled far from your homeworld, showing courage and determination that few races possess." The formal proceedings continued for hours. Jake presented his credentials and outlined humanity's desire for peaceful coexistence. The queen listened carefully, occasionally asking questions through her translator. Her advisors whispered among themselves in their clicking language, and Jake noticed they often glanced at him when they thought he wasn't watching. During a break in the negotiations, Advisor Keth approached Jake privately. "The queen has made an unusual request, Ambassador. She wishes for you to remain here as her personal cultural liaison. This is unprecedented in our history." Jake considered the implications. What would this role involve? "You would live in the palace, study our ways, and help Her Majesty understand human customs and thinking. The Queen believes this knowledge will be essential for lasting peace between our peoples." That evening, Jake was given quarters in the palace's guest wing. The room was a marvel of alien engineering, with walls that adjusted their temperature to his comfort and furniture that molded itself to his body. As he reviewed his notes from the day's meetings, he couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to Queen Lyra's request than simple cultural exchange. Over the following days, Jake's routine became established. Mornings were spent in formal sessions with the Queen and her council, discussing everything from trade agreements to territorial boundaries. Afternoons were reserved for private meetings with Queen Lyra, where she asked detailed questions about human society, family structures, and customs. The Queen's questions often surprised him with their specificity. She wanted to know about human courtship rituals, marriage ceremonies, and the roles of partners in relationships. When Jake asked why these topics were important for diplomatic relations, she explained that understanding social bonds was crucial for building trust between species. Among my people, Queen Lyra said during one such session, the strength of alliances often depends on personal connections between leaders. We must understand how humans form such connections. Jake began to notice strange patterns in the palace. Routine. Servants would prepare elaborate meals that seemed designed for two people, though only he and the queen were present. The queen's advisors would sometimes stop their conversations abruptly when he entered a room, their compound eyes tracking his movements with unusual intensity. Most puzzling of all were the queen's moments of apparent recovery, while she generally appeared weak and relied heavily on her life support systems. Jake occasionally glimpsed her moving with surprising strength and agility when she thought no one was watching. During one late evening walk through the palace gardens, he saw her tending to exotic plants without any mechanical assistance, her movements quick and precise. The queen's intelligence also seemed sharper than her frail appearance suggested. She absorbed information about human culture with remarkable speed and asked questions that revealed deep strategic thinking. Her insights into human psychology were often unnervingly accurate, as if she understood things about humanity that took Jake years of diplomatic experience to learn. 2 weeks into his stay, Jake discovered something that made him question everything. He thought he knew about his mission. While exploring the palace library, he found a section dedicated to what the translator called bonding ceremonies. The texts were filled with intricate diagrams and detailed descriptions of rituals that seemed far more complex than simple diplomatic protocols. When he asked Advisor Keth about these ceremonies, the alien's response was evasive. These are ancient traditions, Ambassador. Her Majesty studies many aspects of our culture to better understand her role as leader. But Jake's growing knowledge of the Veltari language allowed him to catch fragments of conversations he wasn't meant to understand. Words like selection, compatibility, and union appeared frequently in discussions between the Queen's advisors. These conversations always stopped when Jake approached, replaced by more mundane topics about trade and territorial agreements. The most unsettling discovery came during his 3rd week at the palace. While reviewing cultural documents in his quarters, Jake found a detailed analysis of his personal history, including information that hadn't been part of his official diplomatic file. The report covered everything from his family background to his psychological profile, as if someone had been studying him long before his arrival on the planet. That night, as Jake lay in his alien bed staring at the ceiling that pulsed with gentle bioluminescence, he realized that his role as cultural liaison might be more significant than he had initially understood. Queen Lyra's interest in him appeared to extend far beyond simple diplomatic relations, and her questions about human bonding customs took on new meaning in light of the mysterious ceremonies he had discovered. The Queen's apparent disability, her intense focus on his personal life, and the secretive behavior of her advisors all pointed to something larger at work. Jake began to suspect that he had not been chosen for this mission randomly, and that Queen Lyra's plans for their alliance might be far more personal than anything outlined in his diplomatic instructions. As sleep finally claimed him, Jake couldn't shake the feeling that he was being carefully observed and evaluated for purposes he did not yet understand. The disabled alien queen, who had seemed so fragile during their first meeting, was beginning to reveal depths of cunning and purpose that both impressed and worried him. Tomorrow, he decided, he would begin asking more direct questions about his true role in whatever plan Queen Lyra was secretly orchestrating. Jake woke to the sound of soft chiming that served as the palace's morning call. His sleep had been restless, filled with dreams of compound eyes watching him from shadowy corners. The bioluminescent ceiling had dimmed to simulate night, but now it brightened gradually to match the purple dawn outside his window. During breakfast, served by silent Veltari attendants, Jake made a decision. He would spend the day learning more about the language and customs of his hosts, particularly those mysterious bonding ceremonies he had discovered. If Queen Lyra was planning something that involved him personally, he needed to understand what. It might be his first stop was the palace's language center, where an elderly Veltari named Instructor Vel had been assigned to help him master their complex clicking speech. The lesson began with basic greetings, but Jake steered the conversation toward more specific topics. Instructor Vel, I've been reading about your people's ceremonies. Could you explain the meaning of the word that translates as bonding ritual? The instructor's compound eyes seemed to shift nervously. There are many types of bonding among our people, Ambassador Jake. Some are for friendship, some for business partnerships, and some for deeper connections. What kind of deeper connections? The most sacred bonding is between those who choose to share their lives completely. It is how we form what you humans might call marriage, though our customs are quite different from yours. Jake leaned forward. With interest. How are they different? Among the Veltari, such bonding requires extensive preparation and testing. The potential partners must prove their compatibility in many ways. There are trials of intelligence, character, and strength. The process can take many months. Who decides if someone is suitable for bonding? Instructor Vel's antennae twitched. A sign Jake had learned indicated discomfort. In most cases, the individuals choose for themselves. But for those of royal blood, the decision involves the entire council and sometimes the fate of our people. The lesson continued, but Jake noticed that Instructor Vel became increasingly reluctant to discuss bonding ceremonies in detail. When Jake asked about specific rituals he had seen mentioned in the palace library. The instructor claimed those texts were too advanced for his current language level. After the lesson, Jake decided to observe the palace more carefully. He had been living there for 3 weeks, but his focus on formal diplomatic meetings had prevented him from paying attention to the subtle details of daily life. Now he began to notice things that had escaped his attention before. The servants, who attended to his quarters, always worked in pairs, and they arranged his belongings in specific patterns that seemed too deliberate to be random. Fresh flowers appeared in his room daily, always in combinations of colors that reminded him of Queen Lyra's own coloration. The meals served to him included foods that he had mentioned enjoying during casual conversations with the Queen. Most significantly, Jake realized that his movements throughout the palace were being carefully tracked. While he had been given freedom to explore most areas, there were subtle guides everywhere. Servants would appear at intersections to offer directions. Advisors would invite him to join them for walks that led to specific locations, and even the palace's bioluminescent lighting seemed to pulse in patterns that encouraged him to take certain paths. During his afternoon meeting with Queen Lyra, Jake decided to test his growing suspicions. The Queen appeared particularly frail that day, her life support systems humming more loudly than usual. She reclined on her throne as if even sitting upright required tremendous effort. Your Majesty, I have been learning more about Veltari customs. Your culture's approach to important relationships fascinates me. Queen Lyra's compound eyes focused on him with sudden intensity, though her voice remained weak. Relationships are indeed important to us, Ambassador Jake. We believe that understanding between individuals is the foundation of understanding between peoples. I have read about bonding ceremonies. They seem quite complex. Yes, they are among our most sacred traditions. Such ceremonies ensure that those who join their lives together are truly compatible. The Queen paused, and Jake thought he detected something calculating in her expression. Tell me, Ambassador, what are human bonding ceremonies like? Jake described wedding traditions from Earth, explaining how couples chose each other and made commitments before their communities. As he spoke, he watched Queen Lyra carefully. Despite her apparent weakness, she absorbed every detail with remarkable focus. Fascinating, the Queen said when he finished. Your people seem to value personal choice in such matters. We do. Though, in the past, marriages were sometimes arranged for political reasons. And do you personally value such freedom of choice, Ambassador Jake? The question caught him off guard. I believe people should choose their own partners based on mutual respect and affection. Queen Lyra was quiet for a long moment. What if circumstances required a different approach? What if personal choice had to serve a greater purpose? Before Jake could respond, Advisor Keth entered the chamber and whispered something in the Queen's ear in rapid Veltari. Jake's growing language skills allowed him to catch fragments of the conversation, including words that roughly translated to preparation, timing, and ready. That evening, Jake decided to conduct his own investigation. Instead of retiring to his quarters after dinner, he wandered through the palace corridors, following paths he had not explored before. The bioluminescent lighting dimmed in unused areas, creating pools of shadow that provided perfect cover for observation. In a section of the palace that seemed devoted to ceremonial purposes, Jake discovered a large chamber filled with activity. Dozens of Veltari worked on what appeared to be elaborate decorations, weaving together metallic threads and organic materials into intricate patterns. The designs reminded him of the bonding ceremony illustrations he had seen in the library. Jake hid behind a pillar and watched as the workers followed what seemed to be a detailed plan. They consulted frequently with drawings that showed the chamber arranged for some kind of important event. At the center of the space, they were constructing what looked like an altar or platform decorated with symbols that combined Veltari and human elements. As he watched, Jake began to recognize some of the human symbols. They included representations of Earth, the diplomatic seal of the United Earth Government, and even what appeared to be his personal family crest, which he had mentioned to Queen Lyra during one of their cultural discussions. The realization hit him like a physical blow. This was not preparation for a general ceremony or cultural celebration. This was preparation for a specific event involving him personally. The combination of human and Veltari symbols, the altar-like structure, and the ceremonial nature of the decorations all pointed to one conclusion that Jake had been reluctant to accept. Queen Lyra was planning some kind of bonding ceremony that would involve him as a participant, not merely an observer. Jake backed away from the chamber carefully, his mind racing. Everything began to make sense in a new and troubling light. The Queen's detailed questions about human relationships, the careful observation of his daily activities, the analysis of his personal history, and even his selection for this diplomatic mission all seemed to be part of an elaborate plan, but what disturbed him most was the growing evidence that Queen Lyra's apparent disability might be an act. During his weeks at the palace, he had seen too many moments of unexpected strength and agility for her condition to be genuine. If she was deceiving him about her physical state, what else might she be hiding? The next morning brought an unexpected development. Advisor Keth informed Jake that Queen Lyra wished to show him the palace's most sacred spaces, areas that were normally forbidden to outsiders. "This is a great honor, Ambassador," Keth explained. "Her Majesty has never shared these places with anyone from another species." The tour began in the palace's historical wing, where ancient artifacts told the story of Veltari civilization. Queen Lyra, appearing even more fragile than usual, was carried in a mobility chair that allowed her to move without walking. She provided detailed explanations of each exhibit, demonstrating knowledge that seemed to go far beyond what someone in her weakened condition should be able to maintain. "Our people have always valued careful planning and patience," she said, as they viewed a display about Veltari military strategy. "We believe that the most important goals require the most thoughtful preparation." As they moved through the exhibits, Jake noticed that many of the historical examples involved strategic alliances formed through personal bonds between leaders. Marriage between rulers of different clans had been a common method of preventing conflicts and ensuring cooperation. The tour's final stop was a chamber that Queen Lyra called the Hall of Futures. The walls were covered with star charts and tactical displays showing the positions of various fleets and planetary systems. At the center of the room was a large tactical table surrounded by communication equipment. "This is where we monitor threats to our people," Queen Lyra explained, her voice gaining strength as she spoke about matters of strategy. "We have detected disturbing movements in nearby star systems. A hostile force appears to be gathering strength, one that could threaten both our worlds." Jake studied the displays with growing concern. The tactical information showed a massive fleet of unknown ships moving through space in a pattern that would bring them into contact with both Veltari and human territories within months. "Who are they?" Jake asked. "We call them the Devourers. They consume the resources of worlds they conquer and leave nothing behind. Our scouts have confirmed that they have already destroyed several smaller civilizations." Queen Lyra manipulated the controls of the tactical display, showing projected paths of the enemy fleet. "Alone, neither our people nor yours would survive an encounter with this force. But together, combining human technology with Veltari strategy, we might have a chance." Jake understood the implications immediately. "You're talking about a military alliance?" "More than that, Ambassador. I'm talking about a union so complete that our peoples would fight as one, with shared command and absolute trust between our leaders." As Queen Lyra spoke, Jake noticed something remarkable happening. Her voice was growing stronger, her movements more confident. The life support systems around her chair had gone silent, as if they were no longer needed. For a moment, she seemed like an entirely different person, one who radiated strength and authority rather than weakness and fragility. Then, as if catching herself, Queen Lyra slumped back into her chair, and the life support systems resumed their humming. But Jake had seen enough to confirm his suspicions about her true condition. That night, alone in his quarters, Jake tried to piece together everything he had learned. Queen Lyra was not the disabled ruler she appeared to be. The palace preparations suggested a personal ceremony involving him, and the threat of the Devourer fleet provided a strategic reason for the most intimate possible alliance between their peoples. Jake was beginning to understand that he had not been chosen for this mission because of his diplomatic skills alone, but because Queen Lyra had selected him specifically for a role. He was only now beginning to comprehend. Jake spent the next morning in the palace library, determined to find answers to the questions that kept him awake at night. His growing command of the Veltari language allowed him to read texts that had been beyond his comprehension just weeks earlier. What he discovered made his blood run cold. The section on royal bonding ceremonies contained detailed descriptions of rituals that went far beyond simple marriage customs. According to the ancient texts, when a Veltari ruler formed a bond with someone from another species, it created what they called a soul unity. This bond supposedly allowed the joined individuals to share thoughts, emotions, and even physical strength across the barriers of different biologies. More disturbing was the discovery that such ceremonies required extensive preparation of both participants. The text described months of careful observation and testing to ensure compatibility. The potential partner had to demonstrate intelligence, courage, and moral character through a series of trials that the subject often completed without realizing they were being tested. Jake's hands trembled as he read a passage that seemed to describe his exact situation. "The chosen one shall be brought to the royal palace under the pretense of diplomatic necessity. They shall be observed in all aspects of daily life, their character evaluated through casual conversation, and their reactions to carefully planned scenarios. The ruler shall present themselves as weak and in need of protection, testing whether the chosen one possesses the compassion necessary for true unity." The next section made Jake's heart race. When the chosen one begins to suspect the true nature of their situation, they are ready for the revelation phase. At this point, the ruler may begin to show glimpses of their true strength, preparing the chosen one for the full truth that will be revealed during the final ceremony. Jake realized he was no longer reading about ancient customs, but about events happening to him right now. Every conversation with Queen Lyra, every meal, every walk through the palace gardens had been part of an elaborate test. His selection as a cultural liaison had been a cover story for something far more significant. The sound of approaching footsteps made Jake quickly close the ancient text and pretend to study a more mundane document about trade regulations. "Advisor?" Keth entered the library, his compound eyes scanning the room before settling on Jake. "Ambassador, Her Majesty requests your presence in the private garden. She wishes to discuss important matters concerning the future of both our peoples." Jake followed Keth through corridors he had walked many times before, but now every detail seemed laden with hidden meaning. The bioluminescent panels pulsed in patterns that he realized might be communicating information about his movements to observers throughout the palace. The servants they passed bowed more deeply than usual, as if acknowledging someone whose status had changed in ways Jake was only beginning to understand. The private garden was a marvel of alien horticulture, filled with plants that seemed to glow with their own inner light. Crystalline trees chimed softly in the breeze, creating music that soothed the mind and lowered mental defenses. At the center of the garden, beside a pool of water that reflected colors not found in any earthly spectrum, Queen Lyra waited. She sat in her mobility chair, appearing as frail as ever, but Jake now noticed details he had missed before. Her life support equipment was positioned for maximum visual impact rather than medical necessity. The tubes and monitors that seemed so vital were actually connected to devices that appeared to be for show rather than function. Ambassador Jake, please sit with me. We have much to discuss before tomorrow's ceremony. Jake's blood froze. What ceremony, Your Majesty? Queen Lyra's compound eyes studied him carefully. The ceremony of understanding, where we will formalize the alliance between our peoples. Surely, Advisor Keth explained this to you. He mentioned a formal agreement, but nothing about a specific ceremony. Forgive me, Ambassador. In our excitement to finalize the alliance, we may have moved faster than your human customs would normally permit. Queen Lyra's voice carried a note of what might have been genuine concern. Perhaps we should discuss what this ceremony will involve so you can prepare yourself appropriately. Jake's diplomatic training kicked in despite his growing alarm. I would appreciate understanding exactly what will be expected of me, Your Majesty. Queen Lyra gestured toward the crystalline trees around them. Among my people, the most sacred alliances are sealed through personal bonds between leaders. This ensures that neither side can betray the other without destroying someone they care about deeply. You're talking about a political marriage. I am talking about something far more profound than your human concept of marriage, Ambassador. Jake, as Queen Lyra spoke, her voice began to change. The weakness that had characterized her speech for weeks was fading, replaced by tones of authority and strength. I am talking about a unity that will allow our peoples to function as one organism in the face of the threat that approaches us. Jake watched in fascination and horror as Queen Lyra began to transform before his eyes. She rose from her mobility chair with fluid grace, her movements no longer hampered by apparent disability. The life support equipment around her went silent, as she stepped away from it completely. Her exoskeleton, which had appeared cracked and dull, now gleamed with health and vitality. This is who I really am, Ambassador Jake. Everything you have seen before was a necessary deception. The queen who now stood before him was magnificent. Her wings, which had hung limp and useless for weeks, spread wide to reveal intricate patterns that seemed to shift and flow like living art. Her compound eyes blazed with intelligence and power that made Jake understand why her people followed her without question. She was not the fragile invalid he had been protecting and helping, but a ruler of immense capability who had been studying him with the focused attention of a master strategist. Why? Jake managed to ask. Because I needed to know who you truly were, not who you pretended to be for diplomatic purposes. Queen Lyra moved closer, and Jake could feel the presence of her mind pressing against the edges of his consciousness. I needed to know if you were capable of compassion for someone you perceived as weak. I needed to know if you would remain honorable even when you thought no one of importance was watching. I needed to know if you could be trusted with the fate of both our species. Jake's mind reeled as he tried to process this revelation. The tests, the observations, everything was planned from the beginning. From the moment our scouts first detected your colony ships, we began studying your species. We identified the individuals among your people who possessed the qualities necessary for what must be done. You were chosen specifically, Jake, not for your diplomatic skills alone, but for your character. And if I had failed your tests? Queen Lyra's expression became solemn. Then we would have faced the Devourer fleet alone and both our civilizations would have fallen. Jake looked around the garden, seeing it now as another element in the Queen's elaborate deception. How much of what you've told me is true? The threat is real, Ambassador. The Devourer fleet grows stronger every day and they will reach our territories within 3 months. Everything else, my research into your background, my evaluation of your character, my selection of you for this mission, all of that is exactly as it appears. But you're not dying or disabled? No, I am in perfect health and at the peak of my abilities. I have been queen of my people for over 2 centuries, and I have never been stronger than I am today. Jake sat down heavily on a nearby bench, his mind struggling to accept the magnitude of the deception. What happens now? Now you must decide whether you will accept the bond that will unite our peoples. The ceremony tomorrow will join us in ways that go beyond your human understanding of marriage. We will share thoughts, emotions, and strengths. Your human adaptability and creativity will merge with my strategic experience and psychic abilities. Together we will become something neither of our species has ever produced alone. And if I refuse? Queen Lyra's expression showed genuine sadness. Then I will respect your choice, and you will be returned to your people with our thanks for the service you have already provided. But without the unity that our bond would create, I fear neither of our civilizations will survive what is coming. Jake stared at the alien queen who had deceived him so completely, yet whose deception seemed motivated by desperate necessity rather than malice. How do I know you're telling me the truth now? Because, Jake, the time for deception is over? Tomorrow you will see the full scope of the threat we face, and you will understand why I was willing to risk everything on the hope that one human might possess the courage and wisdom to help save both our worlds. Queen Lyra extended one of her elegant hands toward him. I offer you no more lies, no more pretense. Only the truth of what we might accomplish together, and the terrible certainty of what will happen if we fail. As Jake looked into her compound eyes, he realized that everything he had believed about his mission, his role, and his relationship with the alien queen had been carefully constructed illusion. But beneath that illusion lay a truth more significant than anything he had imagined when he first stepped off the transport shuttle onto this alien world. The choice Queen Lyra offered him was not just about his own future, but about the survival of 2 civilizations hanging in the balance of his decision. Tomorrow's ceremony would change him in ways he could not fully comprehend, binding him to an alien mind and an alien destiny. But tonight, as he looked at the magnificent being who had tested him so thoroughly and found him worthy, Jake began to understand that some choices transcended personal preference and entered the realm of historical necessity. Jake spent the night walking through the palace corridors, his mind churning with everything Queen Lyra had revealed. The weight of the decision before him seemed to press down on his shoulders like a physical burden. By dawn he had made his choice, though it terrified him more than anything he had ever faced. When the morning chimes announced the new day, Jake found Queen Lyra waiting for him in the Hall of Futures. She stood before the tactical displays wearing ceremonial armor that gleamed like starlight, her true magnificence now fully revealed. The transformation from the frail invalid he had known to this powerful warrior queen still took his breath. "Away, you look like a man who has reached a decision," she said, her voice carrying both hope and concern. "I have questions first, Your Majesty. If I agree to this bonding, what exactly will happen to me? Will I still be human?" Queen Lyra gestured toward the star charts surrounding them. "You will remain human in every way that matters, Jake, but you will also become something more. The bonding will give you access to abilities that humans do not naturally possess, while my own capabilities will be enhanced by your species' unique strengths." "What abilities?" "Enhanced mental communication, the power to share memories and experiences directly, increased physical resilience, and most importantly, the tactical awareness that comes from having 2 different types of minds working as one." Jake studied the displays showing the approaching Devourer fleet. The enemy ships were massive, their dark hulls bristling with weapons that could crack planets. Even with these abilities, how can we possibly defeat something like that? By doing what neither humans nor Veltari have ever done before. Your people excel at creative solutions and rapid adaptation. My people possess strategic patience and psychic coordination abilities. Separately, these strengths are insufficient. Together, they might create something powerful enough to turn the tide. Queen Lyra manipulated the tactical display, showing potential battle scenarios. The Devourers rely on overwhelming force and predictable tactics. They have conquered many worlds by simply overpowering their defenses, but they have never faced an enemy that could adapt their strategy in real time while coordinating the actions of multiple species simultaneously. You're talking about commanding both human and Veltari forces as a single entity. Exactly. With our minds joined, we could direct the battle with a precision and flexibility that no enemy could anticipate. Human creativity channeled through Veltari strategic doctrine, guided by the combined experience of both our peoples. Jake felt the enormity of what she was proposing, and if we fail, then at least we will have tried the one approach that offers hope of victory. Without the bonding, Jake, I estimate our chances of survival at less than 10%. With it, we might achieve the impossible. Before Jake could respond, alarms began sounding throughout the palace. Advisor Keth burst into the hall, his usual composed demeanor replaced by obvious panic. Your Majesty, our deep space monitors have detected a change in the Devourer fleet's course. They are moving faster than our projections indicated. At their current speed, they will reach the outer settlements in 6 weeks, not 3 months. Queen Lyra's compound eyes blazed with fierce determination. Then we have no more time for hesitation. Ambassador Jake, I need your answer now. Jake looked at the tactical displays showing the approaching doom, then at the alien queen who had chosen him for this impossible task. Everything about the situation defied logic and challenged every assumption he had made about his life and career, but beneath his fear lay a growing certainty that this was exactly where he was meant to be. I accept, he said quietly. Queen Lyra's entire body seemed to glow with relief and gratitude. Then we begin immediately. The ceremony cannot wait for ideal conditions. The next few hours passed in a blur of preparation. Jake was fitted with ceremonial clothing that incorporated both human and Veltari elements, while technicians prepared the bonding chamber with equipment he did not recognize. Advisor Keth explained that the process would take several hours and would permanently change both participants. Are there any risks? Jake asked. In a small percentage of cases, the minds of the participants reject each other, causing permanent psychological damage or death, Keth replied with typical Veltari directness. But Her Majesty's testing suggests you are highly compatible. As afternoon approached, Jake was led to the ceremonial chamber he had discovered during his secret exploration of the palace. The room had been transformed into something that seemed part temple, part library, and part command center. Crystalline formations covered the walls, pulsing with energy that made the air itself seem alive. At the center of the space, 2 platforms faced each other, surrounded by monitoring equipment and what appeared to be psychic amplification devices. Queen Lyra entered wearing robes that seemed to be woven from light itself. Her movements carried a grace and power that reminded Jake she was not just a ruler, but a being whose capabilities far exceeded human limitations. Yet when she looked at him, he saw something in her compound eyes that seemed remarkably human, an emotion that might have been affection or even love. Before we begin, Jake, I want you to understand that this bonding is not just a political alliance. In sharing our minds, we will know each other more completely than any 2 beings ever have. There will be no secrets, no hidden thoughts, no private fears or hopes. Are you prepared for that level of intimacy? Jake thought about everything that had brought him to this moment, from his first glimpse of the supposedly disabled queen to his growing understanding of the deception that had tested his character so thoroughly. Your Majesty, you've already seen into my soul more deeply than I realized. I think I'm ready to return the favor. Queen Lyra smiled, an expression that transformed her alien features into something beautiful and warm. Then let us save our worlds, Jake. The ceremony began with chanting in the ancient Veltari language, performed by a circle of advisors whose voices created harmonies that seemed to resonate through Jake's bones. Queen Lyra took her position on one platform while Jake stood on the other, the space between them crackling with energy that made his skin tingle. Do not resist what you feel happening, Queen Lyra called to him over the rising sound of the psychic machinery. "Let your mind open to mine and trust that I will do the same." As the energy in the chamber reached a crescendo, Jake felt something touching the edges of his consciousness. It was gentle at first, like a whisper in his thoughts, but it grew stronger as the ceremony progressed. Queen Lyra's mind was vast and ancient, filled with memories of centuries of leadership and the accumulated wisdom of her people. But what surprised Jake most was the emotion he found there, beneath the queen's strategic brilliance and formidable intelligence lay genuine warmth and affection for him. Her deception had been necessary, but her growing feelings during their weeks together had been entirely real. As their minds touched more deeply, Jake began to understand abilities he had never possessed. He could sense the locations and emotional states of every Veltari in the palace. Battle strategies appeared in his thoughts with crystal clarity, along with the tactical knowledge needed to implement them. Most remarkably, he could feel Queen Lyra's presence as if she were part of his own consciousness, her thoughts and his flowing together in perfect harmony. The bonding reached its completion as the ceremonial equipment powered down and the chanting faded to silence. Jake looked across at Queen Lyra and saw her not just with his eyes but with a deeper awareness that encompassed her entire being. She was no longer an alien ruler but his partner in the most complete sense possible. "How do you feel?" she asked, though Jake realized he already knew the answer from her own sensations flowing through their bond. "Different, more than I was before. Like I can see possibilities that were invisible to me an hour ago." Jake paused, amazed by the clarity of his thoughts. "I can feel the approaching enemy fleet, can't I? Through the deep space monitors connected to your mind." "Yes, and I can feel your human creativity already suggesting battle tactics that my people never would have considered." Queen Lyra stepped down from her platform and approached him. "We are no longer two separate beings planning an alliance, Jake. We are a single entity with the combined strengths of both our species." As if to demonstrate their new connection, they both turned simultaneously toward the tactical displays that showed the Devourer fleet's approach. Without conscious discussion, they began working together to develop strategies that incorporated human unpredictability with Veltari precision, creating battle plans that neither species could have conceived alone. "Tomorrow we contact your people and begin preparing for war," Queen Lyra said, though Jake felt her thoughts as clearly as her spoken words. "Tonight we begin learning to use what we have become." Jake looked at his bonded partner, the magnificent queen who had chosen him for this impossible task, and felt a deep sense of rightness about the path they had taken. The approaching battle would test their new abilities to their limits, but for the first time since learning about the Devourer threat, Jake felt something that might actually be hope. The weeks following the bonding ceremony passed in a blur of intense preparation. Jake found himself thinking and acting with capabilities he had never possessed as a purely human being. Through his connection with Queen Lyra, he could coordinate military strategies across multiple star systems, while simultaneously managing diplomatic communications with Earth's colonial government. The human response to news of the bonding had been mixed. Some officials expressed outrage at what they saw as Jake exceeding his diplomatic authority. Others recognized the desperate necessity of the alliance he had formed. Admiral Chun, commander of the human colonial fleet, had been skeptical, until Jake demonstrated his new abilities by accurately predicting Devourer fleet movements 3 days in advance. "I don't understand how this is possible," Admiral Chun said during a secure communication session. "You're describing tactical scenarios with precision that our best computers can't match." Jake, standing beside Queen Lyra in the palace command center, felt her ancient strategic knowledge flowing through his thoughts. "Admiral, I have access to over 2 centuries of military experience combined with human creative thinking. We can see patterns in enemy behavior that neither species could recognize alone." The joint fleet that assembled to face the Devourer threat was unlike anything either species had ever created. Human ships with their adaptable technology worked alongside Veltari vessels whose bioorganic hulls could repair damage in real time. Most importantly, The entire force operated under unified command through Jake and Queen Lyra's shared consciousness. When the Devourer fleet finally arrived at the edge of the system, their numbers were even more terrifying than the intelligence. Report had suggested. Hundreds of massive ships moved in perfect formation, their dark hulls absorbing light like holes in space itself. Scanner readings showed weapons, powerful enough to shatter moons and defensive systems that had never been breached by conventional attacks. Are you ready for this? Queen Lyra asked, though Jake felt the question as much through their bond as he heard it with his ears. As ready as anyone can be for something impossible, Jake replied, his human nervousness balanced by the steady confidence flowing from his bonded partner. They took their positions in the Joint Command Ship, a vessel that combined human and Veltari technology in ways that neither species had thought possible. Jake's hands moved over human control interfaces while Queen Lyra's mind directed Veltari biosystems, their actions coordinated through the psychic link that made them function as a single organism. The battle began badly. The Devourer fleets. Opening attack destroyed 3 human destroyers and severely damaged a Veltari cruiser before the joint forces could respond. Their weapons seemed to penetrate every defensive system with ease, while their own defenses absorbed everything the Allied fleet could throw at them. They're adapting to our attack patterns faster than our projections indicated, Admiral Chun reported from his flagship. Conventional tactics aren't working. Jake felt Queen Lyra's strategic mind analyzing the enemy's responses while his own human creativity searched for unconventional solutions. Through their bond, an idea began to form that neither could have conceived alone. Admiral, we need to try something that has never been attempted before, Jake said. We're going to coordinate a simultaneous attack using human unpredictability, combined with Veltari psychic coordination. What does that mean in practical terms? Queen Lyra's voice joined the communication. Every ship in our fleet will act according to apparently random patterns while actually following a complex strategy that exists only in our shared consciousness. The enemy will be unable to predict our actions because they follow no logic that external observers can analyze. The maneuver they attempted defied every principle of conventional space warfare. Human ships began making seemingly erratic movements while Veltari vessels changed their attack patterns in ways that appeared completely chaotic. But through Jake and Queen Lyra's bond, every action was part of a master strategy that used randomness as a weapon. The effect on the Devourer fleet was immediate and dramatic. Their adaptive systems, designed to counter logical attack patterns, began making incorrect predictions about Allied movements. Ships that should have been protected found themselves exposed to concentrated fire, while defensive positions that seemed secure suddenly faced attacks from unexpected directions. For the first time since the battle began, Devourer ships started taking significant damage. Jake watched through the tactical displays as enemy vessels, seemingly invincible moments before, began exploding under the coordinated assault of weapons they had not anticipated. But the victory came at a cost. The psychic strain of coordinating hundreds of ships through pure mental effort was enormous. Jake felt Queen Lyra's strength beginning to waver as she channeled tactical information to every Veltari captain simultaneously. I don't know how much longer we can maintain this level of coordination, she said, her mental voice showing signs of exhaustion. Jake made a decision that surprised even him. Drawing on reserves of determination he had not known he possessed, he began channeling his own life energy through their bond to support Queen Lyra's efforts. The human capacity for stubborn endurance, when combined with Veltari psychic abilities, created a level of sustained performance that neither species could achieve alone. The tide of battle shifted decisively in favor of the Allied fleet, Devourer ships, confused by attack patterns they could not analyze or predict, began making tactical errors that exposed critical weaknesses. One by one, the massive enemy vessels that had seemed unstoppable began falling to coordinated strikes that hit them at precisely the right moments and locations. The climax came when Jake and Queen Lyra identified the Devourer command ship, a vessel so large it dwarfed everything else in the battle zone. Using their combined awareness, They coordinated a simultaneous attack by every remaining ship in the Allied fleet, focusing their fire on a single point in the enemy flagship's defenses. The explosion that followed lit up the entire star system. The Devourer command ship disintegrated in a chain reaction that took out several nearby vessels and sent shock waves through the enemy formation. Without their central coordination, the remaining Devourer ships lost their tactical cohesion and began retreating in disorder. As the enemy fleet fled toward the edge of the system, Jake and Queen Lyra collapsed into chairs in the command center, their shared consciousness exhausted but triumphant. Around them, celebration erupted as both human and Veltari crews realized they had achieved the impossible. "We did it," Jake said, hardly believing the words as he spoke them. "We did," Queen Lyra agreed, her compound eyes reflecting relief and joy. "Both our peoples are safe." In the days that followed the victory, Jake began to understand the full significance of what they had accomplished. The bonding that had begun as a desperate military necessity had created something neither of them had expected. Through their shared consciousness and the trials they had faced together, genuine love had grown between them. The political ramifications were complex. Earth's government eventually recognized Jake's bonding as a legitimate diplomatic action, especially after the decisive victory over the Devourer fleet demonstrated its strategic value. The Veltari people, who had initially been skeptical of their queen's choice of a human partner, came to see Jake as a hero who had helped save their civilization. More importantly, the success of human-Veltari cooperation opened possibilities that neither species had imagined. Joint research projects began developing technologies that combined human innovation with Veltari biological sciences. Cultural exchanges brought new ideas and perspectives to both worlds. The threat that had seemed likely to destroy two civilizations instead became the catalyst for an alliance that made both stronger. Months later, Jake stood with Queen Lyra on a balcony overlooking the rebuilt sections of the Veltari capital. The damage from the war had been repaired, but more than that, the city now incorporated human architectural ideas alongside traditional Veltari designs, creating something beautiful and entirely new. "Do you ever regret accepting the bonding?" Queen Lyra asked, though through their connection she already knew his answer. "Never," Jake replied. "Though I have to admit, when I first arrived here as a simple diplomat, I never imagined I would end up married to an alien queen and helping to save two worlds." Queen Lyra's laughter was musical and warm. "And I never imagined that the human I chose to test and evaluate would become not just my strategic partner, but the person I love most in any world." As they watched the twin suns set over their shared domain, Jake reflected on the journey that had brought him from suspicious diplomat to bonded partner of an alien ruler. The deception that had initially angered him now seemed like exactly the kind of careful planning that had made their success possible. Queen Lyra had needed to know his true character before entrusting him with the fate of both their peoples, and the tests she had devised had proven that her choice was correct. The threat of the Devourers was ended, but Jake and Queen Lyra's story was just beginning. Their bond had created possibilities for cooperation between species that would reshape the future of both civilizations. And in the quiet moments between their public duties, they had found something that transcended politics and strategy, a connection that made them more than the sum of their individual parts. Looking out at the stars where human and Veltari ships now patrolled together, Jake smiled at the thought that the best diplomatic missions were the ones that ended with outcomes no one could have predicted. He had come to this alien world to negotiate a simple trade agreement and had instead discovered a partner, a purpose, and a love that spanned the vast distances between species and worlds.